company needs to thrive and survive so there can be a culture. This is what comes into listening. If I could get in front of those leaders and show them results and say, you made this decision and look at your scores, they plummeted by 15 points. Is this the decision you want to make, or do you want to take a different path?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Break the Wheel. I'm David Murray here with Craig Foreman, founder of CultureC Consulting and former lead people scientist at CultureAmp. Craig, thank you for being here.
David, thank you for asking me to be here. I'm happy to be here. Love the work you're doing and excited for this conversation.
I love it. So, obviously, with the background from CultureAmp alone, there's just a bunch of meaty stuff for us to talk about. And your name is a name that I have heard for a while. So I'm really excited for us to reconnect, to connect. And then eventually later.
I take pride that you just said reconnect. That means I've done a good job at the brand building, and to you, we're reconnecting, and to me, we are connecting. But I'm excited, and I have a funny feeling this is not the first time.
Yeah, me too. Awesome, cool. Well, kicking it off to uncork and unwind, I have a wine today from New York, and you got your coffee. All good. Is it coffee?
It is coffee.
Secret elixir or something. Cool.
Bay Area coffee.
Bay Area coffee. There you go. Because you're in Marin and I'm in San Francisco.
You know it.
So today's wine is from New York. And speaking of New York City's law restricting the use of artificial intelligence tools in the hiring process goes into effect at the beginning of 2024. The law comes with two main requirements. Employers must audit any automated decision tools used in hiring or promoting employees before using them, and they must notify job candidates or employees no less than 10 business days before they're used. What do you think about that, Craig?
Getting right into it. What do I think about that? Look, I admire they're trying, they're doing at least some, thinking about it. I respect the behind that is basically, can we be ethical? How do we use this? How does it not get, misused? However, good luck. This is so big. I don't know specifically about that. I love, it sounds like they're trying to take a little bit of a pause, but how do you pause New York City when you're not pausing? These companies are hiring globally, or all across the country. So I think it's an honest attempt. I like the spirit, both scared and blown away and mesmerized, and love the possibilities of what's coming with AI. I think it's going to transform everything, particularly in our space and every space. So I sit kind of with this duality of this is kind of scary, and also this is mind blowing. And I think it has so many implications across talent and across our organizations that I just keep saying, brace yourself.
Yeah, totally. And you can tell just from laws like this, that's there's clearly a need of folks going oh gosh, we need to get laws out there real quick. We need to do something, regulate something. And then they kind of throw stuff out there, and it's
I think what scares me the most is you just in general, the speed at which our federal government can respond to most things, and that the speed of this and how important this is. So it's nice that New York City is doing it, but really, if anything, we should be thinking about it at the federal level and having honest conversations. And I just don't know I don't know that the way our government's set up can respond fast enough to what's happening.
I know. A lot of things are changing really, really fast.
What do you think about it? And how's it landing for you?
AI, of course, there's AI fatigue in terms of talking about it, but there's still it's very clear from everybody that I'm talking to in the HR space that there's still a lot of uncertainty about what's okay, what's not okay, right? There's clarity about if I want to do something creative, if I need to get some brainstorming for writing a document, if I, want to soliloquize my presentation I'm about to make, whatever. It's then it's great, right? There's of course the concerns that, I saw somebody giving a talk the other day saying they found, some of the core documents that are now powering the latest version of ChatGPT's model. And she realized all of her books are included there without her permission, because there was a, methodology to reverse engineer to see what some of those sources were and have them just get, spat out verbatim. So yeah, there's obviously ethical dubiousness that's out there. And at the same time, there are problems being solved, but there's bias being introduced. But also the biases of humans alone are quite high. We need to check our biases, whether they come from us or they come from tools. But yeah, I say this like I don't have kids and I don't want to have kids, partially because I'm just lazy and like this plant is, barely surviving.
Good. Smart. Keep on that
Once a
path.
month. Yeah, but part of it, I mean, I have a niece, I have a nephew, who I spoil, but I am really frightened of bringing children into this world because of things like this.
Yeah. I mean, look, I have children, and every day, gosh, what will this world look like that, when I'm gone, they're here. All those things you mentioned are true, all these big things. And, to get a little more focused, I'll tell you some of the things that have been on my mind. One is, to anybody's listening, there's a guy named Ethan Mollick. He is a professor at Wharton, and he's great. You can look at his YouTube videos because he's so smart about it. He's been studying it for many years. They use it at Wharton, and he's been using it in labs and classes. So he just gives a lot of great information. But a couple things, and probably mostly referenced by him. One is, what he said there's some research that says they suspect about 60% of the US workforce is using it in some way, shape, or form, and most are not saying anything about it. So everybody out there that's using it, wonder if they should or not, guess what? Everybody else, I think, right now is also using it. Some are choosing to say they are, some aren't, but it is becoming ubiquitous. But here was the thing that he spoke about that really got me thinking about our world. And there's a lot of different ways to approach this, but he said that there's a thing happening right now, and it might not be massive, but it's definitely a thing, particularly in technical jobs and computer engineering jobs, where people are getting 2, 3, 4 jobs, not telling the employers. When I hear that, there's so many ways to pick at it, but to me, it is the first indicator of the immense shift in productivity, and that the things that we've spent time doing, are they really important? If you're really great at coding and you can have a tool like this that can allow you to 4x your output. Now, here, look, our organizations are going to catch up. It might be neat right now. I get a little nervous because that tells me, are we going to 1/3 are, as soon as organizations get with it, what are they going to say? Okay, great. I can hire an engineer that can do 3 times the work. What's going to happen to productivity? What's going to happen to our workforce? These things scare me, and I also think there's things coming. There's jobs we don't know about, but just how many people, I hope people are listening and understanding like where to put your energy moving forward. What are the things that have been valuable for a long time that are not? And what are the things that are going to be more valuable moving forward? Because I'm kind of nervous and scared for what it might do, and excited to our workforce really quickly.
Absolutely. Gosh, we could make this whole conversation just about this.
I know.
But in the spirit of covering a lot of stuff, I'm going to move on.
Let's do it.
To the HR news flash. So there's a new trend dubbed quiet cutting. I know there's a quiet something, right? Quiet cutting is the latest outgrowth of the quiet quitting movement. So quiet cut is essentially when an employee gets an email from a manager telling them their job has been reassigned, and they'll be doing this from now on, and basically take it or leave it. So the reassignments often land them in roles with titles that are less prestigious, come with lower pay, and are more demanding. This effectively allows companies to cut jobs and trim costs without actually laying off workers. Despite the downsides, quiet cutting might seem like it works. So Zetwork found 40% of the people who are quietly cut eventually leave, and about 25% more plan to leave. Probably not a lot of surprise there. Companies including Adidas, Adobe, IBM, and Salesforce are among employers that have restructured their workforces in this way over the past year. What are your thoughts on that?
First, I get a shiver every time I hear the quiet thing. I still do to this day.
It's kind of like during the pandemic, like now more than ever. It's like, shut the up. Like, okay, you don't need to keep using this.
Well, here's what got me with quiet quitting, and we'll move on very quickly. With quiet quitting, I just kept saying, is anybody explaining to me why this is different than a disengaged employee previously, before the pandemic, when we talked about engaged, actively, disengaged, actively disengaged?
Absolutely.
And I was like, and not even from a cynical place. I'm like, okay, if we're gonna have a new term, help me understand. And I talked to colleagues, I talked to other people, and I just kept coming back to like, they've just repackaged this. But the worst was, which I really loved, the Gallup State of the Workforce report that came out in 2023. They took their, what they show, they're the ones that, for many years, engaged, disengaged, actively disengaged. That's the 3 buckets for them. And under those titles said, engaged, quitting, quiet quitting. And they're like, we're reframing. I'm like, you've just proven this whole point. Why are you doing this? Like, if it's not new, whatever. Quiet cutting. I hadn't heard the term until recently. What do I think? Look, so my background, if anybody's listening, I was 6 years as a lead people scientist at CultureAmp, and I spent a lot of time with organizations and helping them think about how are they collecting data, how are they listening to their employees at scale. So listening is, if you're going to dig in with me, listening is one thing, but listening at scale organization is another thing. How do we get relevant information that leaders can leverage and use to make decisions? And one of the questions on the survey is basically my role is, how do I feel about my role as compared to how it was described to me. When we know when people score low on that, that's a high driver of disengagement and also a high driver of turnover. So when I hear that, instead, before I get into any of the other stuff and the like, what the news is saying, I just know that humans, one of the big drivers of engagement is this idea of agency, and that when we go into organizations, they're really not designed oftentimes for human. And one of them is how disempowering they can be with the hierarchies that we've set up. So when people lose agency, they kind of typically act out. If you tell me I'm going to do one thing, now I'm there. This is how I pay my bills, how I take care of my family. Now you tell me I'm doing something else. Naturally, even if I might like the new thing, I'm going to feel like that you didn't respect me in that. And what's our relationship here? Look, and on the flip side, as much as I love to see companies do things, I often say culture first, or thinking about it in like, how do you want to show up as an employer and for the long game? I get that people might leave and they're going to rehire into those. This could be a bigger kind of, I don't want to say Machiavellian, but strategy at the top of saying, look, we're realigning. We're not going to do layoffs, but we know people are going to leave and then we'll just replace them with the right roles. So I don't like that. I like to see companies behave. I believe human and productivity can be, that when people are happy and enjoy their workplace, the workplaces thrive. I also know that companies sometimes make decisions that are at much larger scale. And this may be one of them. Like, we're going to do it. If you leave, fine, I'll replace you with the right person. And if you like the job, great. I don't like when organizations kind of take advantage of the contract,
Totally. And if there's a little bit of a, for lack of better words, a dehumanization where you're just kind of like pushing people.
Come to me, say this role's changing. Do we need to come up with a 3-month strategy? Maybe we need a transition. Can you help us roll somebody in? This isn't working. How can we support you? Do you want to do this? Here are 5 new jobs coming. I mean, like, these things happen. Like, and I always talk about that. We have to accept the game we're playing and also the human realness of it. Part of it's fake. It's a game. We didn't come up on this planet stuffing into buildings, doing this work that we can't touch, see, or feel. So there's a game being played, but also these are humans. These are real lives and relationships. So I try to see both. So in this case, it's accept the game that, like, if a company doesn't make certain decisions, they cease to, like, who cares about any of this stuff here? Because of culture, it's not there anymore. It's gone. So the company needs to thrive and survive so there can be a culture. But how can you do it in a good way? And how can we do it? This is what comes into listening. If I could get in front of those leaders and show them results and say, you made this decision and look at your scores, they plummeted by 15 points. Is this the decision you want to make, or do you want to take a different path? That's where I want to get to, is that we're having real conversations based on facts and helping leaders say, what's your long play here? If you can make a short-term decision that crushes your employee engagement, it's going to take you 18 to 24 months to get back. Is that the decision you want to make? And it might be like, we have to do a riff. Yes. Okay. You have to do it. How's the best way to do it as human focused and working with people? And honestly, I thought this before COVID, but now companies that do this better with distributed, way more flat organizations are going to thrive because they're listening and they're in sync with their people versus a group of people. All this talk about the leader decided everybody's come back to the office. Like, okay, let's see how that goes. Like, what, based on what? On one person's desire to have command and control, or based on some sort of data saying, look, this is a hospital. Like, we need it,
Right. And talk about stripping away autonomy. I mean, I think all of us know that person or have that partner. I mean, in my case, I have that partner, who's like, in fact, like, now I'm hearing an organization that said unofficially, like, tell all of the managers that their team needs to come in 5 days a week, because we're expecting they're only going to come in 3 days a week. But if we tell them 5, then maybe it'll end up being 3. The whole thing is just a big mess. And I like to your point on, like, the game is happening regardless, but we're human. I like to say business is business, but it's between people, not robots. And it sounds like everything that you're saying is aligned with that.
And it's always been my deeper belief that, like, early on, for me at least, it became clear, and what's driven me in my journey into organizational psychology and the work I've done is, I felt like early on in my own journey, I had experiences where I had these jobs where it was like, wow, people are happy and the business is really successful. And to me, I was like, isn't that perfect? Like, I love business and people, and I've also had jobs that have been awful and crushing and all the above. So I think I've just always been led with this idea of, and believe me, I've worked with all kinds of organizations. They're not all aligned with me philosophically, but like this belief that we can, if it's a cutthroat business leader that says, I want to have a great culture because I know it's going to deliver fine, whatever. Or if it's somebody that says, I just believe that I want to build a business and take care of people while I'm doing it. It's all great. It's just the idea that it's good business to take care of people, to do it right, and not to shortcut, because there's always baggage and there's cultural debt that you're going to carry. And then my thing is what I've learned along the way is how to help organizations measure and do it with intention and use real data that they don't believe exists, and it does, and it's powerful.
Well, this is a great transition to the reality check, which is your spotlight. And I really do want to dig deeper into this. So, I mean, obviously the time that you spent at CultureAmp, just given, everything that folks do and discover with CultureAmp, I'm sure you're working directly with clients when you're there and seeing a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, like, given limited time, like if there's one or two things that, you wish that folks knew that, about your day to day, the realities, the things that you see, maybe that I'm going to combine segments here, reality check and people misunderstand, maybe that people misunderstand about culture setting or listening.
What I think people misunderstand, and I judge that, I project that as maybe, when I say data, if somebody said to me data, what would go through my mind, what I've learned is data alone is boring. Let's be real. Data is not inspirational. It's quantifiable, but it's boring. If I send you an email full of a bunch of stats and say we make a decision, they've done MRIs that show if I just give you a lot of data, like a little part of your brain lights up, right? But data in itself is not inspiring. Stories are incredibly inspiring. If I tell you a story and if I do it well and I put you in that same MRI, your whole brain lights up. However, stories are inspirational, but don't always drive change. They can make you feel good. They don't drive change. And so when I have to use the word data because I work a lot with that, but what I'm really thinking about is how do we merge data and story to create context? And that's where change happens. And helping leaders of organizations, how do I navigate through the initial, like, whatever, it's fluffy, to like, no. I've seen this enough times where I've gone in and worked with an organization and a senior leadership team. We've put in place a robust, reliable, valid listening tool. And we've come back to the table. And here's what I always find. And I think this is what drives me. There's always something that we validate, a belief that they have about the organization, around teams, around leadership, around all kinds of things that we see that's the case. There is also always, sometimes different varying degrees, but always what I call myth busting, that when we get real data back, there's always something go, oh my gosh, I thought that team was really struggling. They look great. Right. Or I didn't realize that that's how people felt about, our vision, our strategy. Or so imagine, put yourself in my seat. I've done this with hundreds of organizations. When I walk into a company and they're like, we're not really doing anything, or we just use Google surveys and our office, admin helps run it. I think to myself, you think you're doing a good job. You're asking good questions, but there's so many layers of how are you segmenting it? Do people trust it? How are you getting it out to people? How are you looking at it? How are you interpreting it? And what you might be missing along the way. I'll give you a great example. I've been working this past year with this organization on a culture transformation. And part of it was we're bringing data to the table. There was a new CEO that had just come in. The company had grown and done well, but was looking to go to the next level. We ran the survey. I came back to give a debrief to the executive team. And I said, one of the things I called out was just when we looked at one of the offices, the scores were way off around engagement than the other offices. And the CEO looked at it and he was like, I knew it. I knew I needed to get down there. Meaning he knew there was a problem among all the other problems that he had, clearly, as a CEO trying to juggle this and a brand new CEO. He got his butt on a plane in like the next 2 weeks and spent time in that office and then did it one more time, and which he wouldn't have done in between. Then we ran the survey again 6-7 months later. The scores rose by 15 points. And I honestly believe it was as simple as quantifying something he already knew, put it into context. He made the decision. He knew what to do. And by showing up, made the difference. It was not some big complicated process. It was using data and story to help him go, that's where I need to focus my attention. So I think that's a big misunderstanding of what's possible. And it's such a low cost, so when I think about what companies spend on their marketing understanding and analysis, their sales understanding and analysis, but you say your people and your culture are most important, how are you investing in that? And the irony is it's so much less expensive than all those other things. And if you believe that's your biggest driver of an organization, why don't you understand? So that's the misunderstanding. And my work is how do I help organizations and leadership teams understand what's possible just to get it in their hands because they can do so much better. Yeah. So that's my big one.
No, I love that. It's clear without data, there's always like plausible deniability or kind of that like, well, I think this is a problem, but there's not enough certainty. So you're not necessarily motivated to take action. Bias comes up a lot, as right? We do organizational network analysis at Confirm. We ask people who do they go for help, advice, energy, motivation, et cetera, to try and identify the tails of performance as seen by the network as another piece of data. And one of the the things that people kind of will sometimes ask is, if you're asking questions like that, like, is it a popularity contest? And it's like, well, first of all, there's a popularity contest of one when you're managing up to your manager, number one. Number two, when you're doing peer 360s, like there's a selection bias popularity contest when you're picking the people, to write about you. But the important thing that a lot of people forget is that if you want to do anything about bias in your organization, just to your point, you got to measure it. You got to see like what is actually occurring in your organization that's a problem if you want to be able to take action on it. And like, what better a way than to ask questions to people about what they see and what they perceive, and then measure the bias from that and go, oh, it looks like this person that's in a highly visible role, or this person that's underrepresented, and I look at the comments that are being shared and like the what's being said, and you see like, oh, there's bias here, that then you can do something about it,
And I want to be clear, and I think this is important, that we throw that word bias around a lot. I think there's bias that we have to keep an eye on that's having negative impact on people, but our brains are biased by default. We can't, there's too much data to take in, so we're trying to create buckets and stories and understand. That's perfectly fine. And I think that it's the data and the either validating or breaking apart some of our stories based on the data. But I want to share something with you that I think is really relevant to your work, to my work, and to probably this audience. And I know when I talk about data, oftentimes people might think, but like, these are people, like it's not just data. Absolutely. So here's how I think about it. Data can tell us a lot about a group, but very little about an individual. An individual can tell us a lot about themselves, but very little about a group. When you put those two together, data should help direct and help us understand. If you're managing 200, 300, 1,000 people, you think you're having a lot of conversations, but you're not. That's the bias part, that you need something to check it out. But the data should just point you in the direction, and your manager and your leaders in the direction to go talk to the people, because that's where we get in trouble. If I send a survey and I say, only 2 out of 10 male engineers struggle with their managers, but 6 out of 10 female engineers struggle, and that manager gets that information and goes back and thinks the female on their team doesn't like them, that's wrong. It tells you nothing about her. It only tells you about this kind of like larger. So that's where we get in trouble, is when we merge the two together and we see large data and we think that tells us something about a person. It doesn't. I've seen it too many times where, oh, I know who said that. And then no, they didn't say that. So we got to be careful there. And I think I often work with organizations to help them see those two. I don't want to just unleash data and say, don't be human. I just say, let's use data to help us understand where and what to look for. Now go have conversations with people.
There you go. I love that. Well, this is actually, talking about people managers, a great transition to our next segment we call Break the Wheel or Break a Heel. Mm-hmm. Do you get the break a heel reference? Do you know what that's a reference to?
I mean, no. I'm going to answer no.
I like it. So some people will be laughing because it's a reference to wearing high-heeled shoes.
Yeah, I got that.
If you've never done. Oh, okay. Oh.
And like, you break a heel, but I didn't understand if there's some other subtle meaning that I didn't. Break it down for me.
No, it's the opposite of subtle. If you've ever broken a heel before when you're walking around, it's exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. It's like that. Or you have to take, anyways. So break the wheel or break a heel. The topic is people manager interactions with direct reports. So I'm gonna give you an item on this topic, and you're gonna tell me break the wheel or break a heel, and add as much.
Wait, help me understand. Why would I say break a wheel versus break the heel?
Well, break the wheel, it's like Daenerys Game of Thrones. That's the inspiration of break the wheel. You think it's transformational, it's positive, it's a good thing, and break a heel is the opposite. Okay, I'm going to answer, and you tell me if it's a break a wheel or break a heel. You're going to say break the wheel or break a heel. Ooh. Okay, give me that. Let's do this. I know. I'm forcing you to give your opinion. Okay. So, people managers following their direct reports on social media. Break the wheel or break a heel? Like, welcome to the new world. Like, break a wheel, break the wheel. It is what it is. That's fair. And also and to every employee, like, the world's public. Think about what you're putting out there and who you're inviting in, who you're sharing with. Absolutely. I think that's totally fair. And I think we're all kind of proactively structuring what gets out on social media, if anything. Yeah. And I think our relationships are becoming more this idea. Like, I think there's people at work that I would never connect with, like the regular world. And I think there's people at work that I meet that I like, and they become friends. So absolutely, break the wheel. Yeah. And, as we age, we have limited places to meet other people in life. Like, there's no harm if you really want to be friends with somebody, even if they're a direct report or vice versa. It's all good. Okay, I like LinkedIn. Do a lot on LinkedIn professionally, people. It's good. That's true. Oh my gosh. Too much LinkedIn. All right. Next. People manager interactions with direct reports. Discussing cannabis use. Break the wheel or break a heel?
Depends on which state you live in.
You gotta make a choice.
Break the wheel.
All right. Okay.
I have friends now. I have friends that are working like at bringing psychedelic therapy into the workplace. Like,
I will proudly say that ketamine psychotherapy is something that's very transformational for me in terms of navigating anxiety.
100%.
Work-related anxiety. So yeah, huge fan of that.
So I'm definitely break the wheel on this one.
Let's talk about that.
What's that? Oh, I know people. If you need somebody, I have some amazing people.
Yeah, send them my way. I would love to have them on.
Head of DE and I at MAPS.
Love it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Next, getting drunk. People managers getting drunk with their direct reports. Break the wheel or break the heel?
When you say getting drunk, you have to define, like having drinks is fine. I think that
getting drunk.
Yeah, then I'd say break a heel. Like you have a positional piece of authority. I see this even with executives. They want to be, I get it. But you know what? Like it or not, however you feel about it, when people walk in the room, especially in our hierarchical, where people have positional authority, you need to be really thoughtful. It's not just friends. What you say means things. Who you're hanging out with means something to somebody else. Go have your friends somewhere else. Yes, of course you should be social with your group. Go have drinks. Do not get drunk. Do not don't put yourself in that kind of vulnerability. There's too much at risk. And at the end of the day, that team is put together beyond you. There's a contract. You're there to perform. I mean, have relationships, be tight. Believe me, I've hung out with a lot of colleagues, but I think we need to draw lines as well. And particularly if it's a manager and because what about the person that wasn't there? What about how funny is it? It's all guys and none of the women on the team are there. Like there's too much at risk and it's not right. And when I talk about being culture first and being human, I think that managers in their desire to be liked, cross boundaries that they shouldn't and undermine the work that they're really trying to do.
Hear, hear. All right. Well, I'm curious to hear this one then. Having a romantic relationship, people managers with direct reports.
Same thing. Break a heel.
Very interesting.
And if you are, I think you should report it. I think you should ask the organization to restructure things. I'm not saying that people don't have relationships at work, but I think it should be transparent and that the organization deserves to know. And that, there's a bigger thing at play that organization's hiring people and building something. And you start to put that into it, I think it deserves transparency and to be managed correctly. And when it's hidden, you're basically undermining, I think, part of your contract.
Yeah, the transparency piece I think is valuable, especially in startups. Early on in people's careers, like sometimes you see this kind of thing happen, but when there's at least transparency about it.
Okay, break the wheel or break the heel. Alternatives, sexual orientations and lifestyles. What if you're polyamorous? What if you are, where's the place for, what if you don't adhere to monogamous lifestyle? Is there a place for that in the workplace?
Absolutely. Well, I can say this so I had a sex therapist that actually one of the most famous ones, I'll say without revealing any names, but one of the things I remember learning from him was, at least as it relates, I'm a gay man, as it relates to urban areas, and this was like about 12 years ago, 2010, 2011, something like that. He said the research showed that in urban areas in the United States, 50% of gay men that their relationships were open. And I thought that was fascinating because, first of all, it resonated with what I saw. But in terms of people talking about it and visibility about that, there really wasn't a lot of that. So I really appreciate you surfacing that because, gay, straight, otherwise, there's all sorts of kinds of structures of relationships. And there's, whether it be polyamorous, monogamous, asexual, all of the above exist. So I appreciate it. I think
it's an interesting one, right? If we're really opening the lens, is there space for that? Or is that one of those hidden things that we just assume, we say more, but I thought about that lately. What are the new boundaries and the new edges? And I think that's one of them. Alternative orientations and how people are, in their lives. But if we're going to, travel, do all these things together, that if that's your truth, can it be your truth at work? Or is that something you have to hide?
Totally. Well, and there's these concepts of, we talk about heteronormativity, that everybody expects everybody to be straight. There's also monoganormativity of everybody expecting people to be monogamous, and that doesn't always happen. So.
Yep.
Good servicing. Okay, fifth item.
Yep.
Loaning money. People managers loaning money to their direct reports. Break the wheel or break the heel.
Break a heel. 100%.
100%. No doubt.
This is all these things you're talking about. They're undermining and not respecting the power dynamics. And that just doesn't have a place. It crosses boundaries that I think shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that resonates with me. Absolutely. Moving on, the wheel breaker of the week. So this is a positive thing that we see, but I'm actually curious on this one. I read it. I was like, well, let's see what you think. UPS recently opened its largest warehouse in Louisville, Kentucky. The warehouse is expected to initially employ 200 people alongside more than 3,000 robots, sometimes known as cobots. Haha. The company claimed the robots are a boon for people operations, saying they'll increase employee retention by 30% and reduce workplace injuries. They said the move is part of the company's long-term strategy to elevate customer and employee care through technology. What are your thoughts on that?
So first, randomly growing up for 2 years, I lived in Louisville, Kentucky, and I learned it's not Louisville. They say Louisville. You have to
Louisville.
You got to say Louisville.
Did I say that right? Louisville.
Everybody that's not from there, you say Louisville,
I'm not
Louisville.
going to pretend to say it right. Okay.
It's like Louisville.
Louisville.
What do I think about that? I think that I could give two shits about the spin that they're putting on it, like whatever. And it's truth. Are they going to reduce workplace injury? Hell yeah, they're going to reduce workplace injury, and they can have a worker for 24 hours. But quite frankly, I think because of the work that this is where I often I look at things that you can hear. Just Craig as a human, am I philosophical? Oh, it's sad and it's been talked about, but I'm more interested in navigating and helping organizations. And it's the same with AI. Like, it is robotics, animation. That's also going to allow us to bring back manufacturing to the United States, right? Where we've lost a lot of it because of and the truth is, and even now in China, it's becoming like, it just is. So we can sit around and talk all day long and, hypothesize about, is it right? Is it wrong? My dad used to say, something to the effect of, what happened to buggy whip makers when the car came out? Like, the world is changing, and my whole approach is how to support organizations in the world to change and do it in a human way. Like, I can't stop that. I have my own personal opinions. Do I like to see it or whatever? But in the end of the day, it is. And though, how do we still take care of those people that are having to interact with those robots? How are we are we, paying them more because we're saving money? Are we, I don't know. Like, I want to see organizations do right by the people, but I can't blame. An organization is designed to be efficient. An organization is always looking. And it's the same with boundaries. Like, if the people in the organization aren't protecting the boundaries, we can't get mad at the organization. An organization is designed to take. That's all it knows how to do. It's the people that set up the boundaries and say, this is what's acceptable and what's not. And we have to protect those boundaries. And I think the same thing holds. Like, as an organization, you're looking to optimize and to be as efficient as possible, especially when your competition is. What can you do? But are you doing it in a good way? Are you lying to people and saying, no, this is for you? Like, okay, like, be honest. Or, hey, this is a transition we're going through. How do we take care of our people as we go through this transition? How do we do it in a meaningful and mindful way? So that's where I always go back to, that I'm here to support organizations design themselves to be as most effective and achieve the outcome they're set out to achieve. That's why they exist, but also do it in a way that takes care of people.
Absolutely. And if there's no accountability and there's not somebody actually like looking and monitoring, to your point, organizations just do what they do. It's like incentives, it's like when you're hiring, an hourly worker, for example, to do a task, that if all you're doing is just paying them by the hour and there's no impact on their pay in terms of the quality of their work, they're just going to work as long as they can work. But if you incentivize them by saying, like, you pay them, a bonus based off of like the quality of their work, or you pay them based off of the, the number of the times that an external party accepted the thing that they submitted, whatever it is, like, there's positive incentives that align, that create the right behavior. It's really hard to do that at an organizational level unless you have some kind of incentive for the organization to do the thing that's right. And if there's no regulation and no external pressure, then they're just going to be efficient.
Yeah. And, you hit on something that it may be tangential, but it was something I thought about before we got into this. And that one of my ahas, especially if I'm doing the work I've done with surveys, is thinking about outcome factors and input factors. And I think oftentimes it got my mind around this, and oftentimes organizations don't. So I'll give you an example where this comes from. When we run an engagement survey, you'll ask a series of engagement questions, right? That's the thing that they're trying to change. But that's considered the outcome. That's the thing you want to change, which is usually on pride, motivation, seeing themselves at the organization, things that are very hard to pull a lever on. And then you ask a series of other questions: leadership, management, systems and processes, belonging, all those things. And you look at, how do these things relate to what we're trying to do? Engagement, right? And helping organizations understand what are the biggest drivers of the thing you want, focus on those and test and believe that that'll drive what you want. Because what happens, and I think we were just talking about, if we incentivize the wrong thing, or you say to a leader, hey, as long as you get your engagement scores up, you're going to get a bonus. This is where the bad behavior comes in, because they are only, I mean, I think about Wells Fargo, I think about United. I mean, there's a lot of stories about the wrong incentives were in place. People did bad things systemically, a lot of people. So it wasn't just one bad actor. And oftentimes it's because if you want a salesperson to do that, well, maybe the metrics are lots of phone calls, high quality calls. Are you calling the right people? Let's measure those three things, believing that if you do those, sales happen. Not, I'm only going to bonus you on closed deals, which means screw you, CS person. I don't really care about that because I'm just getting the deal. We're not supporting the whole system and we're incentivizing the wrong things. And oftentimes, I think about this a lot, is when I look at things, are you incentivizing the outcome or the inputs, and trying as much as possible to get organizations to focus more on what are the drivers of the thing you want, focus there. And that's a much trickier way to go about it. It's easy to incentivize what you want on the outcome, but that's also where we get a lot of bad behavior. So I think that kind of ties into what we're talking about in all of this. What are you incentivizing? Why? And are you understanding what are the things to incentivize that will get the outcomes that you want?
Absolutely. Well, that's definitely some wisdom on the rocks. So
Boom,
know what you're incentivizing.
Break the wheel.
Sure you're doing the right thing. Break the wheel. Break the wheel. You just insert that at random times. Break the wheel.
No, unless it's negative, and then I'll say break a heel.
There you go. I love it. Now you can take this.
I'm with it now. You've changed my life.
Now you get it. I love it. All right. This next segment, one of my favorites, is called What Should I Have Done? So I'm basically going to tell you about something that I did in my life at the workplace, something work related.
Okay.
Tell you what I did, and then you're going to tell me what I should have done.
How about you tell me the situation? I tell you what you should have done. I want to hear what you did.
You said you don't want. Oh
no,
well,
I think it'd be more fun to like tell you my thoughts and then see what you did.
Oh, like as we're going through it.
Like you give me the scenario, I'm like, here's what I would have done, and then I say, what did you do?
Okay. Well,
you don't have to.
Let's do that. Let's give it a shot.
This is your show.
I'm all about experimentation. Let's do it. All right. So the scenario is working at a startup. Was traveling to another city. Our organization had acquired a smaller organization. We positioned it as a merger in terms of it was two organizations coming together. And like my role there was taking on a new team. I wanted to establish a connection with these folks, create a bond with them. They live in a different place. And so I wanted to, kind of meet them in their zone and do what I can so that, life will be easier when we're working remotely. In terms of that bonding, just in terms of our group.
Did you get drunk? Did you get drunk with them?
Well, the short answer is not quite. I did drink with them, but I didn't get drunk.
Fair enough.
But what happened was, we were with a big group and everybody was drinking, and like the whole group, out in a public space, so relatively safe.
Yeah.
But then as the night got later, I actually had one of these folks who wanted to go hang out with a smaller group involving like these folks that I want to really connect with. And I said, absolutely. And then, we went to a different bar. They got just plastered, just really drunk.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite drink as much as they did, but I was friendly. We got along. I actually wanted to make sure that they were being safe.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I got you guys glasses of water. A lot of that. Right? Yeah. We go to another bar, and I'm in there with one of the guys, and then another person runs in and says, "Hey, so and so, just one of these folks you're with, is getting in a fight out in front of the bar."
Okay.
That's the scenario. The question is what do you do?
First of all, I would go outside. I would go see what's going on. And I would, unless it felt dangerous. I mean, if this is escalated to a point that it's dangerous, for just like any fight where it's like, back away, don't hurt yourself. But I don't think that's the case you're saying. I think that I would do my best to protect my colleague and get them, how do I de-escalate the situation? Maybe have somebody.
So you try to get in the way and kind of like.
I would, yeah. I would try. I would, yeah. Especially with a colleague that I don't want to see them have any kind of bad ramifications, find themselves getting fired because they got like all kinds of things that you are together. You're a work team. You take care of one another, especially when people are drunk and there's a fight. Is there a way that I could de-escalate and try to I get it. So, I mean, stuff gets out of hand, but I when those kinds of situations happen, I usually keep a cooler head, and just try to de-escalate the situation. And I get it, people, and I think sometimes when people get up all chest to chest, and it's hard to de-escalate between those two people because they're too committed to their position that I personally think sometimes they're waiting for somebody to get in there and give them an excuse. I would have ripped your head off if Craig didn't pull me aside. But I would want to try to do my best to remedy the situation. Kind of like on a football field when they're all doing their thing and the refs get in there and kind of break it apart. What'd you do?
All right.
Did you get into?
You want to know what I did?
Did you get into a gang scruffle?
No, okay. This is in terms of background, right? So there, like, I imagine, if somebody is male or female, like how their level of comfort to doing something will vary, I guess. Because in my case, what it was, the truth is, I never pretty much ever go to like regular bars. What you might call a bar, I call a straight bar. And I don't usually go to straight bars.
Okay.
If I go anywhere in the past, right, I'll go to gay bars.
Was this a straight bar?
Etc. Yeah.
Fucking straight,
it was
man.
a bar. And everybody else was straight. And the people don't fight in gay bars. What they do is they have catty comments to each other. They have drama and they talk trash, and they make people feel bad about themselves, but no physical fights, right?
Yeah.
But I find that bars and clubs, like straight bars and straight clubs, like that's, not quite as uncommon. And so for me, I just I didn't know what to do. And I was frightened AF.
Yeah.
And I did not want to get in the way because I actually was concerned for my own safety. As I was concerned about the safety of this other guy.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just stood there with my jaw dropped, not really sure what to say or do because, put on your own mask before helping others.
Yes,
I was afraid,
Well, I think it's a really interesting question. I don't think that my answer is the only right one. I think it's just the Craig one.
Fair.
I worked when I was in the military, and then after the military, I was in college and I worked at a nightclub and a music venue. And I just got exposed to a lot, and I noticed that that stuff used to freak me out a lot too. And I also kind of just saw it enough that I was like, I could keep my heart rate down and keep cool. But I also think that you did nothing wrong. You do not have any obligation. And if it's not in your comfort zone, I think there's guys that like to go out and do that shit. Like, how come that never happens to me? How come it seems to happen? How come that always seems to happen to the same dude that gets into fights at the bar? And that's kind of a little on you. Personally, if I was there with my colleague, I'd try to de-escalate it. But I don't think you did. I think there's nothing wrong with your response. And I think you are allowed to take care of yourself and you don't have to own somebody else's decision, especially when you're out of your element in many ways. You're somewhere you're not used to. Probably you're in a new place. Like if I was in Germany for a work trip, this is the first time I've been to Germany. I might be a little more apprehensive. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand the culture. I don't know. So I think I personally just want to say that I think you are absolutely entitled and you don't owe anybody anything. You just have to do what's right, what's best for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I totally think if I had your experience, I might have been more comfortable doing it. So we're aligned. I appreciate that. That's good. Heartwarming end of story. All right, moving on. Horror story of the week. Do you have a brief horror story?
Horror story. When you say of the week, I just think back of this last year. Unfortunately, and I know we go through these cycles and it's been a rough year. And the horror story really is all of these really, really sad riffs, these really sad layoffs. Look, as somebody in this space and as somebody who was many, 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 many years ago, really inspired by places like Google who keep getting on the list of the best places and all this stuff. I have friends that worked at Google and there's 2, 3 that I know of that got laid off. And they all had similar stories. One was there 17 years. And so get this, could you imagine after 17 years, companies say, come here, be part, like we're creating team, family, whatever. Waking up and having your Slack, your email, your entire connection. And it just upsets me. And I'm saying Google on purpose because this is public knowledge and it's really, these are the torchbearers and they showed up poorly. I think they'd probably own that. And it makes, when I hear those stories and I've seen other companies do it in a good way. So look, there's the saying that you can tell a lot about a culture by the way they bury their dead. And I think a lot of organizations want to let go of responsibility at the end to make themselves feel better. And it really hurts me that I was at LinkedIn and there was this ideology that if somebody had to, at least when I was there, if somebody had to be fired, we're all responsible. We hired that person. We made this decision. It's not working. How do we do it in a good way? And I get, again, back to the game, that companies have to go through things, that these things happen. I'm not naive about that. But when I hear a company cut somebody out that abruptly after 17 years and not realizing there's probably goodbyes that need to be said. There's probably I'm sure there's a lot of things to think about, safety, security, but how might we do this in a good way with these people? And so I think the horror story is just what I've been seeing this past year when hard times hit. And I think what's the problem is I'm trying to, in my work and helping organizations move the needle forward. When that happens, I feel like we just slip backwards, that people again say, I can't trust you when you say, come here and form relationships, collaborate, form human connections. If the world keeps reiterating that at any moment, it doesn't fucking matter, and you're not going to think about me as a human. So I think we all need to have responsibility in this, and we can do it better. I'm not naive. These things happen, but I think it's been really sad and unfortunate to watch how some of these Zoom calls where everybody gets cut or like that. It can be done so much better.
Absolutely. If you're going to cut humanely. Absolutely. Well, horror story I think a lot of us have seen these days, and one that I hope that more companies will pay more attention to. We're going to be wrapping up here imminently. A couple more segments here. Wobbly Wheel of the Week. I like to dive this one. This is, not quite breaking a heel, but maybe a wobbly wheel.
On its way.
On its way, yeah. Jack Dorsey is getting rid of annual reviews and PIPs at Block. Instead, the company will give workers a rating of exceeds, meets, or falls below expectations. This news came shortly after Dorsey warned of upcoming job cuts at Block. I know some folks who've seen this story, really were covering just the PIPs angle of it. But I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on this one.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is like right at the heart of what you're doing. Look, when I was at CultureAmp, when I started, our main tool was the engagement. While I was there, we acquired a company called Zugata, and that brought us into the performance management space. And I had to spend many years kind of getting my head around it. I hadn't really started in that space, and there I was working with clients. So I learned a lot and thought a lot about it. I, first of all, will be the first to say, and almost in a positive way with you, that I fundamentally really struggle with performance reviews, and I think we agree on that. I think that it's because it's so painful, because everybody hates it, because it's so problematic, it's easy to say, let's just get rid of it. But I really had a moment when I was talking to the CEO of Zugata, who became like our senior product person on performance, and he really helped me think about this differently. Like, I think again, by being honest about the situation when it comes to performance, every employee, there's a contract in place. Like, there's a relationship. You're going to do X. We're going to provide you with X in benefits. And because it's contractual, there needs to be moments in time where we evaluate the contract. How are we doing? Should we increase the work? Should we increase the bid? Should we get, right? Like, it is contractual. And I think sometimes we want to ignore that, which is separate from development and growth of the human. But we have to take these moments to evaluate how are we going and looking at it. And what he said was, that's happening regardless. So it's easy to say, let's get rid of performance reviews. It makes everybody feel better. But what you're doing is you're just pushing it underground, where it's going to become, the bias is still there. We know that the stuff around men, we know all of these things around pay equity. So what his point was, I would rather a flawed, transparent system that's working towards minimizing bias, even if it's not perfect and painful, and we have to keep working on making it better, than taking what feels like the easy answer, which is just get rid of it, because what we're doing is more damage. Like, it's so problematic if you look at the data around if we don't put controls in place where bias and where these things come into play, when we're talking about people's lives, their promotions, equity around all of that. So my stance on that is, I haven't dug completely into it and what he's saying about what your ratings are going to be or not be, but my point is that I know it's easy, it's painful, no one likes it. That's the work that you're doing. And I think we can do so much better. That it's not designed, performance management is not designed for people. It's, we need to do better. But getting rid of it only is there's more problems if you stop and think about it that have a bigger impact on humans. So I think we just keep working on how do we make it better. And I'd rather a flawed system that's transparent than a tucked away, pushed away version of that.
Absolutely. I love everything that you just said. And it's really common, especially with continuous feedback systems and folks having these horrible experiences with the performance management platforms process. It's a nightmare. You spend weeks on calibrations. It's awful for everybody involved, the traditional way. And yeah, like if it seems like you can cover your bases just doing continuous feedback, you might do it. But everybody inevitably who says, let's just abandon this and do continuous feedback, you realize, oh crap, we actually got to measure this stuff. We got to, to your point, like we're having
How are you going to promote your people?
How
are you going to pay your people? How are you going to make sure that you're doing it not because somebody's buddies with the manager?
Exactly. And so when I see this, it's like, I empathetically understand why organizations hit this conclusion, right? Because it's kind of like, if all you have to brush your teeth with is a block of wood, you're probably going to stop brushing your teeth. But maybe if you just go out and explore, you'll find this thing called a toothbrush that actually is pretty darn good at it. And maybe, if you're really looking around, you find whatever, an electric toothbrush. Like, that's what performance management looks like these days, is people have this block of wood and so they go like, I'm just not going to brush my teeth. In reality, a lot of folks forwarded this news to us at Confirm as this was happening because, sometimes I feel like being at an organization that's still growing and a lot of people haven't heard of ONA or just the methodology around being able to see these tales of performance that, show the power law instead of the bell curve that you get out of these manager ratings. Like when we see news like this, it feels like people say the world's going to end and that there's a way to save it, but you don't know how to reach them. It's like, it's this feeling like, what's the person? I don't know. Some Greek mythology, right? The person who's destined to like know the solution. I don't know. Somebody listening is probably going to shout out a name, but the point is feeling like what a solution would work for an organization like this, but you don't have a way to really communicate that to them in a way in which they would hear it, because you want to identify the top 15% creating 50% of the value, or the bottom 5% creating 50% of the problems, which is what all of our
I commend what I do like about the work that I know about what you're doing is that you really are trying to rethink about this and trying to address some of the fundamental problems. I think, look, I watched what we did. I've watched Lattice. I've watched other, and it still feels, and I said this internally. I mean, I don't hide this, that like, again, I stand with the comment I said before that transparency in a flawed system is better, but I still feel like we're putting Band-Aids on. We're not really addressing the organizational structures and the things that are in place that aren't working, that this is inside of. And until we do, we're just trying to make a better broken system. And I think it's twofold. One is we have to rethink our organizational structures, that this idea of this pointed top hierarchical, like I understand where it came from, but if we really evaluate it, it's not aligned with what most of our companies are saying they want today. And now we're trying to put in performance systems that are aligned with that. It's not how we work. I often say to people, like, you don't have children, I do, but whatever, like, think about the responsibilities you have in your life. Even the basic shit, feeding yourself, getting a shower, going shopping, organizing that next trip, taking care of the people you take care of in your lives. How many managers do you have for that?
Right.
Yeah, we go to work and, like, I have children, I have all these responsibilities, and I go to work and I've got 3 tiers of manager. Like, where did that happen? And we don't need as much. I think we need to rethink this whole thing. We've just accepted this, but the truth is, I think, and we're not going to get into it today, like, there's a place for managers in the future, but we have to rethink them, and we have to rethink what it means. It's not just a function. It's like the old idea of HR is just there to protect the top. Managers are just there to protect the top. They're not. They're there to support the people. And how do we create better systems that are less command and control, and that really tap into what really drives and motivates humans to build the right organizations for the promise that organization is making to the world to be successful and exist. So when I get really philosophical in this, it's like, until we really address how our organizations are designed, we're going to have problems, because we're trying to put a measurement system on top of a broken organizational structure.
Absolutely. All right. Here. I'll say that much. A couple more segments and we're wrapping up. HR Speak Funny. So this is where we pick a phrase and make fun of it. BCC Ninja is today's phrase. Have you heard of the phrase BCC Ninja?
No, but you're going to make me feel like an old guy now. What's BCC Ninja?
A BCC Ninja is an employee who secretly includes others in an email conversation without the recipient's knowledge.
Ooh, not cool. Again, like, right. And this goes
you would never admit to it if you did, but.
No, I wouldn't. Maybe in an older version of myself, but like, I would, if I was working with that employee, I'd be like, what's really behind this? Like, what are you trying to serve? Because, and I think in the end of the day, if there's a situation that has you feeling that that's important, it's the challenging situations where character is really tested. And I think it's easy to show up and be the good person when everything's going well. But when you're frustrated or you want to like talk bad about somebody, to pull something like that it's mean, it's manipulative, and it's like, if you're going to show up that way and then be frustrated about the organization showing up for you, then like you're playing into your part. So I always call on everybody, like, what would you do if you're being your best self even in the face of bullshit? And when I hear people do something like that, it's not clean. It's not clean. And how can we build a great workplace? With culture, I talk to people and I say that, like, culture it just is. So if you're sitting and you're complaining about the culture not doing anything, which is fine, that is your role. Is that your role? Do you want to be the guy that's the BCC ninja? Like, that's the person you want to be at the organization? You're not like, and then you say you really want to work in a better workplace. Like, you can't have it both ways.
Fair enough. Well, speaking as somebody who did Taekwondo when I was a kid and did not do it very well, I can say that I probably wouldn't be a really good BCC ninja either. Or I wouldn't be one if I tried to be, and I'd probably accidentally CC like the whole company or something.
I'd mess it up.
Oh, totally. Have you ever seen that happen? That's juicy. I'll just say
that's
that
good.
Much.
That I enjoy.
All right. Last segment. Decline to comment. You're going to pick. So I'm going to give you 3 questions. You're going to answer 2, and you can decline to comment to only 1.
Okay.
So if you decline to comment to the first one, you're going to have to answer the next 2.
Okay.
All right. You up for it?
Yeah.
All right. Number 1. Who is the worst manager you ever had?
It's very clear. I'm not going to name the name, but it was probably one of the most uncomfortable situations of my entire work. And it also set the stage for everything I did. I mean, set the stage moving forward, but I also take responsibility. I sort of walked into it with I wanted to be the boss. I wanted to be a manager. I wanted all these opportunities. And this particular I had this opportunity to go work in a new department, and I knew I'd be working for this person who had a history of being really tough. And I was like, but I can do it. I spent a year with this person. I basically, in the middle of work one day, while interviewing with this person, other people, I basically had a panic attack the first time in my life. Next thing I knew, I was out in front of the building calling my wife saying, I think I just quit and I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing. It was one of the scariest things in my entire life. As I look back, it was the wall that I needed to hit that I walked myself into and really created the path for everything that came afterwards. But it was hard and it was mean. And part of it was watching, not only being under this sort of scrutiny, but I was a manager for this person and watching them. They would pull people in the office and like start in on them. And then the people would be crying. And like that point where you're like, okay, that's enough. And they'd keep going and keep going. It wasn't cool. But it also was a big lesson for me. And it's experiences like that remind me every day of the work that I do, because somebody out there is experiencing that today. And if I can start putting data in front of that stuff gets teased out real quickly, or they can't be blind to it. You either have to say, we accept that here, but people hide out without any sort of data or any way for employees' voices to be heard. That stuff can exist because, well, they get results. And I want that those kinds of stories inspire me and push me to do the work I do every day.
Wild. Well, clearly managers make or break everything. My goodness, that sounds wild. All right, question 2. What was the biggest stretch or exaggeration you've ever made on your resume?
So funny. When I first thought about it, it's just not, I feel like my work is spoken for itself. I don't feel like I've stretched too much, but when I was, it's funny because it was when there was a question I was thinking about before we got into this, which is like best job ever. And when I was young, I spent a couple years working as a summer camp counselor, and that experience taught me a lot. And I always lean on that. Like that was a great, like everybody gets along, everybody's committed to the mission. It was these wonderful experience. And that has also fired me up on the opposite side of why can't we bring more of that to the workplace? However, the first year, remember I told you I moved to Louisville. So my parents split, my mom had to move, and I didn't want to go to Louisville. I wanted to delay it as long as possible. So the only way to do it was get a job, but I was 14. So to work at this campus, the CIT, and get a job, I had to be 15. So I lied in the whole summer, which felt like the biggest thing ever, that I was living this big lie. I was a 15-year-old, but I was a 14-year-old.
Interesting.
That's pretty lame. That's my best exaggeration on my resume. I'm sure there's something
better.
But
Hey, well, everyone's got their
I was
own
living
thing.
a lie all summer.
You might have felt really bad about it, right? Even if
I did. I think by the end of the summer, I think somebody found out. Like I didn't.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh my goodness! Simpler times. All right. Question number 3. What have you used AI to do and didn't mention it, so you're kind of just taking direct credit for it?
Oh, I'm all over that. You kidding me? And I don't feel
feel
bad about it. Yeah, look, here's the deal, right? I've worked inside of these many, this is my first time as a solo. As a matter of fact, it's an interesting time to be starting my own business. It's the first time in my life. It started 6 months ago. Talk about a time when AI came on the scene, and I'm blown away at what I can produce in the productivity. But for instance, I'll work with it to write content or articles, and part of me is like, is this right? Is this wrong? And I think to myself, I've sat inside these organizations where they hire people for $60,000 or $70,000 a year. They come from who knows where to be professional writers. They basically say, we want you to write this. They come back and say, here's what we wrote. And they say, hey, can you tweak this or edit this? And they go back and they do it. And then they say, can you do this or do that and edit it? And then they say, this is great. Let's send it out to the world. Now, and as I'm doing this, I'm thinking to myself, if I can afford $60,000 to pay somebody that might be okay at it, nobody blinks an eye, but because I'm leveraging ChatGPT to help me organize my thoughts and do the same exact thing, I'm not feeling bad. I've seen behind the curtain. So anybody that would say differently, it's like your competitors are doing it. They've been doing it. If you have the money and you can run an organization, you can do it. But all of a sudden, I can't do it because that's cheating. BS. I'm not. And look, I have kids. I talk to them all the time. Like, you have to be good in integrity with the rules of your school, but I am not against you using these tools. But I also like, if, play by the rules, that's the environment you're in, don't cheat. But at the same time, I'm not going to tell them to not leverage this technology that's not going the other direction. So, I've used it. I've already written contracts with it. Amazing that I can have a conversation with something and have a contract written. How much money that saved me. I've seen people work with professional writers. I know what it looks like. And all of a sudden I have a professional writer I can access at $20 a month. I'm in.
Well, I love what you said early on that, 60% of organizations are using it, but like nobody's talking about it. It's kind of like a premarital sex in the 50s. I don't know.
There you go. I think there's people, everyone out there, especially when we're distributed, there are people working an eighth or a quarter of what they used to work, and you don't even know it. And the question is, does it matter? Do we need to restructure our organizations? What's it about? Is it about control, or is it about output?
Yeah, a lot to think about. Well, with that, Craig, it has been an honor to chat with you. You are full of wisdom and insights, and I think this is the longest podcast we've had yet. But I think it's for good.
Enjoyable, not boring.
No, absolutely. I think it's worth it. So
yay, break the wheel.
Breaking the wheel. Yeah. Ending on a positive note to cheers to change. So this year, Walgreens will close most locations. Or I guess by the time people hear this, last year, Walgreens has closed most locations Thanksgiving Day for the first time in its history, joining the recent trend of other large U.S. retailers like Walmart and Target for closing for the federal holiday. I'm definitely a fan of letting people take their freaking time off. So here, cheers to change.
Cheers, change.
And having more work-life balance. And Craig, it was an honor, and I wish you a wonderful new year, next year.
Thank you, David. Life. I appreciate it. Wish me all success in my new endeavors at CultureC Consulting and helping more organizations. The thing about CultureAmp was that I could only work with the clients that I was able to work with, and that I saw so much need, and there were so many more clients that wanted more support in how to better leverage data and embed it in their decision making. So really, that's what I've set out to do with my consulting, to help more organizations either use the tools that they have better, or help them bring in tools and bring data and listening to the forefront as a strategic initiative. So that's what I'm focused on next year. And anything we can do together, or anybody listening to this, please check me out, www.culturecraig.com, or come to my LinkedIn page. Find me there. I'm easy to get a hold of, and I'd love to have a conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Craig Foreman, founder of CultureC Consulting. Good to meet with you. Have a wonderful
future.
We'll chat soon. All right. Bye-bye.